Welcome to this deep dive, into mental science.
Okay.
Today we're going to be looking at this 1926 text by Ernest Holmes called The Science of Mind.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he says right at the beginning, he's not really coming up with anything new,
Okay.
but he's really trying to translate ancient wisdom for a modern audience who's looking for something deeper.
I see.
And it's a bold statement. He says that this knowledge can free you from sickness, poverty, and unhappiness.
Well, that's a pretty big claim.
Yeah.
How does he say we can actually achieve that?
So he says it's like harnessing electricity.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just, wish for a better life.
Right.
You have to understand the laws and conditions that govern this power,
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
just like any other force of nature, right?
Right.
But then how does he reconcile the existence of suffering with a loving God?
Okay.
Because if God is all-powerful and all-loving,
Right.
then we should inherently be free from these things, right?
Yeah, right.
So how does he reconcile that?
Well, he talks about this inherent freedom that we all have.
Uh-huh.
He says that God wouldn't create us to suffer.
Right.
He uses the analogy of the prodigal son.
Okay.
We have this freedom,
Uh-huh.
but it's up to us to kind of discover it,
Discover it on our own.
on our own. Yeah, and that journey can be challenging.
Right. It's not always an easy journey.
Definitely not, no.
So how does this discovery of freedom work in practice?
Well, he describes it as a subtle sense that guides us towards liberation.
Okay.
It's almost like an inner compass
Okay.
that's directing us towards our true potential.
It's interesting because he suggests that there's this thinker beyond the physical brain.
Yeah,
If we can think, something must be doing the thinking.
right.
It can't just be the brain on its own.
Exactly.
So what is he saying is doing the thinking?
Well, he distinguishes between the brain as a tool and the mind as the force utilizing that tool.
All right.
Like imagine a light bulb.
Right.
The light bulb doesn't create electricity.
Right.
It just expresses the power flowing through it. It's a conduit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he's saying that the brain doesn't think on its own.
Uh-huh.
It just expresses the thoughts that come from this deeper source, the mind.
So the brain is like a receiver
Yeah, like a receiver.
for thoughts that are coming from somewhere else.
That's a really interesting concept
Yeah, it is.
because it leads to this realization
What's that?
that Holmes describes as an aha moment.
Okay.
We're inherently perfect beings,
Yeah.
but we experience imperfection in our lives.
You're right. We all know that.
So what's the deal?
Yeah.
Well, his answer is that our thinking,
Okay.
the way we use our minds,
Uh-huh.
can become misaligned with that inherent perfection.
So our thoughts are powerful enough to create our reality,
Exactly.
but we can also create problems with our thinking.
Right. It's not just about positive thinking. It's about right thinking,
Right. Thinking.
aligning our thoughts with that inherent perfection.
I see.
And this right thinking actually interacts with a universal law.
Okay.
He compares it to electricity.
It's consistent.
Uh-huh.
It's responsive.
Right.
So if we align our thinking with that truth,
Uh-huh.
we can create real tangible changes.
Okay, so it can affect our experience.
Yeah, it can affect our own personal experience, but it goes even further than that.
What do you mean?
He suggests we can actually influence the well-being of others with our thoughts,
Really?
regardless of distance.
So we can influence people who aren't even near us.
Yeah, he's implying that there's this interconnectedness through a universal medium, a universal mind.
Okay, hold on. Are we talking about telepathy here?
Well, that's a question Holmes wants us to consider.
Okay.
He compares it to radio waves. We can't see radio waves,
Right.
but we know they exist.
Right. We experience their effect.
Exactly. So he's suggesting that maybe there's evidence for this universal mind.
Through observing its effects.
Through observing its effects, right?
That's an interesting way to think about it.
He is.
So where does this idea of a universal mind fit into his concept of existence?
Well, he talks about this trinity. It's not in like the religious sense.
Okay.
For him, the trinity represents three aspects of reality: spirit, soul, and body.
Okay.
So spirit is the conscious mind,
Okay.
the part of you that's aware that makes choices.
Right.
Soul is the subconscious mind, the realm of mental laws.
Okay.
And body is the physical form.
Right.
So these three parts are all interconnected,
Yeah.
but they're not all equally aware.
Okay.
He says that only spirit, which he calls the word, possesses self-awareness.
Okay.
The subconscious, or law, operates based on the input from the conscious mind.
Okay.
And the body or matter is where those thoughts manifest.
So it's like we're at the helm
Yeah.
steering with our thoughts.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
But if the subconscious mind is driven by the conscious mind, where do our ingrained habits come from?
Well, that's where the idea soul stuff comes in.
Soul stuff.
Yeah, it's like the fundamental substance of spirit,
Okay.
the raw material that all forms arise from.
Like the clay.
Exactly like clay.
And our thoughts shape it.
Our thoughts shape it.
Uh-huh.
He compares it to ether.
Uh-huh.
But even more fundamental than that,
So it's like this formless potential.
formless potential, exactly. And then he goes on to talk about self-existence.
Okay.
He uses this question. Why is water wet?
Okay.
It's not wet because of something external to it. It's
Right.
just its inherent nature.
Yeah.
And he applies that same reasoning to life itself.
Okay.
Life just is interested.
Yeah.
It's a self-existent truth.
Right.
He connects this to the I am that I am.
Wow. That's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is.
Life just is.
Yeah.
But where does God fit into that?
Well, his concept of God is really interesting.
How so?
He talks about Father, Mother, God.
Okay.
So he includes both masculine and feminine principles
Right.
as a unified whole being.
So it challenges the traditional notion of just a masculine deity.
Exactly.
That's a really refreshing perspective.
It is.
So we have self-existent life, we have this Father, Mother, God, and we have soul stuff. But how do we reconcile a changeless God with all the change that we see
Yeah, that's a good question.
in the world?
He says that God's essence remains unchanging,
Okay.
but God's actions are constant.
Okay.
So it results in the ever-changing forms that we see in the world.
Okay, so the forms are constantly changing,
Yeah.
but the underlying essence stays the same.
The underlying essence stays the same, exactly like
Sorry.
a still pond.
Okay.
The surface of the pond can be disturbed,
Uh-huh.
but the water itself stays the same.
Great. So God is like the water.
Exactly.
The forms are like the ripples.
They're ripples, the waves.
But he also says there's a difference between soul stuff
Yeah.
and soul.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
Soul stuff is the raw material,
Uh-huh.
and soul is the intelligence working with that material.
I see.
It's the force that shapes it.
Okay.
He uses the example of a flower.
Okay.
We can't create a flower,
Right.
but the intelligence within the soil
Yeah.
can. So he's suggesting that this creative intelligence, the soul, is infinitely more capable than our human intellect.
So is that working through everything?
He says it's working through everything.
Wow.
From the tiniest seed to the vast expanse of the universe.
That's incredible.
It is.
But where do we fit into all of this?
That's where the subjective mind comes in.
The subjective mind.
Yeah, think of it like your personal operating system.
Okay.
It's your interface with the universal mind.
I see.
It's the avenue for both your automatic bodily functions
Okay.
and your conscious and subconscious experiences.
So it's like our own personal channel.
Yeah.
On this universal network.
Exactly.
Okay, but how does it actually work?
Well, Holmes says that it stores every experience you've ever had,
Really?
possibly even as images. And it includes family and race tendencies that you might not even be aware of.
So it's like this vast inner library
A vast inner library, yeah.
containing everything that has ever shaped us.
Everything that's ever shaped us, exactly.
That's incredible.
And this leads to another interesting concept.
Okay.
Mental atmospheres.
Mental atmospheres.
Have you ever met someone
Huh?
and felt an instant connection?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Or felt uneasy for no apparent reason?
Definitely.
So Holmes explains this through mental atmospheres.
Okay.
He says, we give off these very real vibes as a result of our thoughts and actions,
Like an energy field.
like an energy field.
Okay.
It goes beyond just physical appearance.
Right.
It affects how we interact with others.
So it explains those gut feelings we sometimes have.
Exactly.
Okay, I can see that.
So it's like we're all walking around in these bubbles of mental energy,
Wow.
constantly influencing each other.
So then what about psychics?
Psychics.
Yeah, are they just really good at reading these mental atmospheres?
Well, Holmes suggests that psychics are individuals who can consciously tap into the subjective realm.
Okay.
Something that we're all capable of to some degree.
Right.
They're reading from the Book of Remembrance. That's stored in the subjective mind.
So they're tuning into a different frequency,
Yeah, like tuning into a different frequency.
picking up information that's usually hidden.
Exactly.
But if our subjective mind is so open to influence, can we be manipulated?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
But Holmes reassures us that we can neutralize negative influences
Oh.
by affirming the power of the one mind,
Okay.
consciously choosing what we allow into our minds.
So it's about being mindful
It's about being mindful.
of what we're consuming mentally.
Exactly.
Just like we're mindful of what we consume physically.
Exactly.
Okay, that's reassuring.
It is.
So we're not just helpless victims
Yeah.
to whatever thoughts are out there.
We have a choice.
We have a choice.
Yeah.
But what about those inner voices that people sometimes hear?
Yeah.
That's just imagination.
Holmes calls that clairaudience,
Clairaudience.
the ear of the soul.
Oh, wow.
He suggests that those voices could be messages from your inner wisdom,
Okay.
warnings, or even communications from other minds.
Other minds?
Yeah.
Okay, so like from other people.
Yeah, potentially.
Wow.
But he stresses the importance of discernment.
Discernment.
Is the voice coming from a reliable source?
Right.
Or is it just random noise?
So we need to learn how to filter
Yeah, filter out the noise.
what's true and what's not.
What's true and what's not.
That's fascinating.
It is.
So he's saying that we have these inner capacities that go beyond our physical bodies.
Yeah, he talks about things like clairvoyance,
Okay.
telepathy,
Mm-hmm.
even influencing the physical world with our thoughts.
Wow. It's like we have these superpowers.
It's like we have these untapped superpowers, yeah.
That we're not even aware of.
That we're not even aware of.
It's a little scary, but also really exciting.
It is.
So he's encouraging us to explore these abilities.
To explore them. Yeah, not just dismiss them.
Not just dismiss them.
As impossible.
Okay.
He even talks about prophecy.
Prophecy.
There are different levels of prophecy.
Okay, what are they?
One is based on interpreting existing mental trends,
Mm-hmm.
and another is about illuminated individuals who are tapping into the thoughts of God,
Wow.
revealing the true destiny of humanity,
Okay.
which is immortality.
Immortality.
Yeah,
That's a bold statement.
it is a bold statement.
So if spirits might exist within the one mind
Uh-huh.
and telepathy is
Yeah.
a thing,
Right.
does that mean communicating with the dead is possible?
Well, he acknowledges that possibility,
Okay.
but he also points out the challenges.
What are they?
Imagine trying to transmit a complex lecture to a large audience just mentally.
Yeah.
That's how hard it is to get a clear message from a spirit.
Wow, that's a great analogy.
Right.
It makes it a lot easier to understand.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential for interference
Right.
and misinterpretation.
Okay.
So it's not as easy as it sounds.
So with all this talk about unseen forces and mental influence, how do we protect ourselves?
Well, that's where controlling the subjective mind comes in.
Controlling the subjective mind.
Yeah, he emphasizes that we're not just passive recipients of thoughts.
Okay.
We have the power to choose what we focus on,
Right.
just like we choose what food we eat.
So we can cultivate a mental diet.
A mental diet that nourishes our well-being
Right.
and supports our growth.
So we need to be mindful
Mindful.
of the information we consume,
Absolutely.
the people we surround ourselves with,
Yeah.
the thoughts we allow to take root.
And the thoughts we allow to take root.
Okay.
And this brings us to the concept of the relative and the absolute.
The relative and the absolute.
Holmes explains that the absolute is cause
Okay.
and the relative is effect.
Okay.
We can't have one without the other.
So the relative depends on the absolute.
Exactly. Things like time, space, and change,
Uh-huh.
they're all relative,
Okay.
existing within the framework of the absolute.
I see. So how does that apply to everyday life?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something that Holmes encourages us to explore. It might change how you view your own limitations and what you think is possible.
It's already making me rethink some things.
It is a powerful concept.
It is.
What about good and evil?
Yeah, what does he say about that?
His perspective is very different from traditional views.
How so?
He defines evil as simply what harms,
Okay.
and he believes that it diminishes as we cease destructive actions.
So it's not about battling some external force.
No,
It's about choosing good.
choosing good in our own actions.
Okay.
And similarly, he sees sin as error,
Rare.
not a cosmic offense.
Right.
And he says the punishment for sin is the natural consequence of those errors.
So it's not about God punishing us.
No,
It's about the natural consequences of our actions.
the natural consequences of our actions.
The natural consequences of our actions.
Okay.
So turning toward good
Mm.
eliminates both.
Eliminates both.
The error and the suffering.
That's a really interesting take.
It is.
So it's less about pleasing God,
Uh-huh. And more about aligning with truth.
aligning with truth.
Yeah.
That sets us free. That sets us free, exactly.
And what about salvation then?
He sees salvation as an internal realization
An internal realization.
of our unity with the whole.
Okay.
So grace then is not a reward, but it's the natural outcome of this realization.
I see. So we're already saved.
Yeah, we're already saved. We just have to recognize it.
Wow.
So it's a very different perspective
Very different.
than the traditional view.
What about willpower then?
Willpower.
Isn't that important for achieving our goals?
He challenges the traditional view of willpower. He
Mhm.
says it has its limits.
Okay.
You know, we don't will ourselves to live.
Right.
We just do.
We just do.
Because life is,
Right.
willpower can't make us something we're not.
Okay.
True creation comes from imagination.
An imagination.
The root of both life and action. It's
Right.
imagination that gives birth to new possibilities.
So instead of forcing things,
Yeah,
we need to tap into that creative power.
that creative power of imagination.
So how do we do that?
Yeah. He talks about the power of visualization.
Visualization.
Seeing your desires as vividly as possible
Uh-huh.
and presenting that image to the universal mind.
Okay.
And then it works to manifest it.
So it's like planting a seed.
Like planting a seed
Yeah.
and letting it grow.
Letting it grow.
Yeah.
It's not about straining or holding on to the thought.
Right.
It's about making the vision clear
Yeah.
and trusting the process.
Okay. I like that.
So the subjective mind acts as a mirror,
A mirror.
reflecting what we put into it.
Oh, I see.
So every thought
Mhm.
creates ripples,
Oh, okay.
especially those thoughts charged with emotion.
Right, right.
So mastering our thinking
Ah.
is mastering our lives.
I see.
And then he talks about building a magnetic personality.
A magnetic personality.
It's not about being fake.
Okay.
It's about expressing the real self,
Okay.
cultivating qualities like sincerity,
Okay.
enthusiasm,
Mm-hmm.
genuine service to others,
Okay.
confidence,
Mhm.
even a good sense of humor.
Okay. These are qualities that are already within you,
Okay.
waiting to be unlocked.
So it's not about changing who we are,
Yo.
but about expressing more fully who we already are.
Expressing more fully who we already are.
I like that.
He believes that when you radiate these qualities,
Uh-huh.
you become a magnet
A magnet.
for the good that you desire.
Wow.
So it's not about chasing things.
Sure.
It's about becoming the kind of person
Huh?
who attracts those things naturally.
Wow, this has been mind-blowing so far.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It is.
What stands out to you?
I think the biggest thing is self-responsibility.
Self-responsibility.
He's saying we have the power to choose.
Right.
We have the power to shape our reality.
We're not victims.
We're not victims.
We're creators.
We're creators.
Yeah.
So I think a good question for our listeners to consider is,
Mhm.
if our thoughts are so powerful,
Okay.
what kind of reality are you creating right now?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Are your thoughts aligned with your desires? Something to think about.
It is.
It is.
This has been amazing.
Yeah, this is great.
We've covered so much,
Yeah.
from the nature of the mind to the
Uh-huh.
universal
Yeah.
mind,
Yeah.
soul stuff,
Soul stuff.
communicating with spirits.
That's right.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
There's so much more to explore.
There is.
So stay tuned for part 2,
Definitely.
where we'll delve into more practical techniques
Okay.
for applying these principles
Sounds good.
and discuss how you can overcome challenges,
Okay.
manifest desires,
Yeah.
and create a more fulfilling reality
Awesome.
for yourself
Yeah.
and the world.
I'm excited for that.
We do.
Me too.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Ernest Holmes' The Science of Mind.
It's great to be back.
In part 1, we talked about some pretty mind-bending concepts.
Yeah, we did.
The universal mind, the thinker beyond the brain,
Right.
even the idea of inherent perfection.
Yeah.
But how do we actually apply these ideas in a practical way?
Well, that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not enough to just understand the theory.
Right.
We need to be able to use this knowledge.
To improve our lives.
Exactly.
So where do we start?
Well, Holmes talks about a process he calls demonstration,
Demonstration.
bringing your desires into reality
Okay.
through right thinking.
Okay. So it's not just wishful thinking.
No, it's not just wishful thinking.
It's about taking action.
It's about aligning our thoughts with this law of mind,
This law of mind.
which is just as real as gravity.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, he gives specific steps for what he calls mental treatment.
Mental treatment.
Yeah. This is where the rubber meets the road.
Okay.
You're aligning yourself with a higher power.
Like prayer.
It's similar to prayer,
Okay.
but it's more than just asking for things.
Okay, what else is it?
It's about recognizing your unity with this universal mind,
Right.
this creative force.
So we're shifting our inner state
Exactly.
to create the outer reality that we want.
Exactly.
Right.
And he talks about resolving things into thoughts. What does that mean?
Seeing everything as ultimately an expression of thought.
Everything.
Our bodies, our relationships, our finances, even challenges.
So if we want to change something externally,
Yeah.
we need to change how we think about it internally.
Exactly.
But how do we change those deeply ingrained thought patterns?
Well, he offers specific techniques.
Okay, like what?
One is the practice of denial,
Denial.
mentally denying the reality of the problem
Okay.
and affirming the truth of perfection.
So we're replacing limiting thoughts
Yes.
with more empowering thought.
With thoughts that are aligned with our true nature, our
Okay.
inherent perfection.
But how do we do that when we're feeling stuck?
Well, it takes practice.
Okay.
And it's not about struggling or forcing.
Okay.
He says we can't demonstrate beyond our ability to believe.
What does that mean?
Our results will always reflect our level of understanding and conviction.
So if I'm constantly focusing on lack,
Yeah.
I'm not going to experience abundance,
It's unlikely.
no matter how many affirmations I repeat.
Right. You have to address those underlying limiting beliefs.
So how do we do that?
He talks about using affirmations, visualizations,
Right.
and contemplative practices.
To reprogram our subconscious.
To reprogram the subconscious, exactly.
It's like we're rewriting the code
It's like rewriting the code.
that's running our lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that there are no failures.
No failure.
Only results.
Okay.
So if something doesn't manifest as we expected,
Uh-huh.
it's not a sign that we've failed.
Yeah.
It's feedback that we need to adjust our thinking.
So we should look at it as an opportunity to learn,
Exact.
not as a personal shortcoming.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this ties into the idea of detachment.
Detach.
Yeah, we can't control how or when things manifest.
Right, yeah.
But we can control our thoughts and our reactions,
It's like planting a seed
like planting a seed.
and trusting that it will grow.
Trusting the process.
Yeah.
We don't have to dig it up every day to see if it's sprouting.
We just have to trust.
Trust in the process.
Okay.
So we're working in partnership with a greater intelligence
Right.
that's always operating for our good.
That's a nice thought.
It is.
So we plant the seed with our thoughts.
Yes.
We nurture it with our beliefs.
Uh-huh.
And we trust the universal mind to bring it to fruition.
Exactly.
But what if we're facing challenges that seem out of our control?
That's a great question.
What about external circumstances?
Well, that's where acceptance comes in.
Acceptance.
Yeah. Sometimes we need to accept certain situations.
So we're not just pretending everything is perfect.
No, acceptance doesn't mean giving up.
Okay.
It means finding peace within the current circumstances
Okay.
while still holding the vision for something better.
So we can accept what is,
Yes,
but still strive for something more.
exactly.
Well,
And
okay.
recognizing that even in the midst of challenges,
Uh-huh.
we always have the power to choose our thoughts
And our reactions.
and our reactions.
So even when things are tough,
Yeah,
we still have that inner power
we do.
to choose how we respond.
We always have a choice.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is.
So how do we tap into that inner strength when we're feeling overwhelmed?
Holmes reminds us that we're never truly alone.
Okay.
We're always connected to the universal mind.
Right.
That source of infinite love and support.
It's like having an invisible safety net.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful image.
It is.
So even when we stumble, we know we're not going to fall too far.
That's right.
So those challenging experiences are actually opportunities for growth.
He believes that they are.
They're not punishments,
No.
but they're happening for us,
For our growth.
not to us.
Exactly.
Right.
And this leads to one of his most powerful teachings.
What's that?
You are inherently resilient.
Inherently resilient.
You have the capacity to overcome any obstacle
Wow.
and emerge from any challenge stronger and wiser.
So it's not about avoiding challenges.
Yeah.
It's about embracing them
Embracing them and seeing them as opportunities.
to transform us.
Transform us. Exactly.
And he says we're not just physical beings,
Right.
but spiritual beings having a human experience.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
It is.
So he encourages us to connect with that spiritual nature,
Okay.
that part of us that's connected to the divine, the
Right.
source of all creation.
So it's not about denying our human experience.
No.
It's about remembering that we're also spiritual beings
Exactly.
and that we have access to a higher wisdom
a higher wisdom and a greater power
than we often realize.
than we often realize. Yeah.
That's incredible.
And it brings us to another important aspect of this.
What's that?
Cultivating positive emotions.
Positive emotions.
Yeah, he sees emotions as potent energies
Okay.
that can either support us or hinder us.
Okay.
It's not about suppressing emotions
Okay.
or pretending everything is always rosy.
Right.
It's about recognizing the power of our emotions
Yeah.
and choosing those that align with our desires.
So we need to become more aware of our emotional state
Yes.
and consciously choose those emotions
Yeah.
that support our growth.
Exactly.
But what about the negative emotions
Your negative emotions.
that seem to pop up?
Well, he offers techniques for transforming those
Transforming them
Yeah.
into something positive.
into more positive, productive energy.
Okay, so we're not suppressing them.
No, we're not suppressing them.
We're actually using them as fuel.
We're using them as fuel for our growth. and remembering that we're not alone in this.
We're all in this together.
We're all in this together, yeah.
Yeah.
He emphasizes the interconnectedness of all things.
So when we start to understand and apply these principles,
Yeah.
we not only transform our own lives,
Right.
but we also contribute to a better world.
To a more harmonious world.
That's a great point.
It is.
So before we move on to part 3,
Okay.
what's one practice or technique that you found particularly helpful?
You know, the practice of gratitude is so simple,
Gratitude.
but so powerful.
Yeah.
Just taking a few moments each day
Uh-huh.
to appreciate the good things in your life,
No matter how small,
no matter how small.
can make a big difference.
It can shift your perspective.
Yeah.
And open you up to receiving even more abundance.
So we're training our minds to focus on the positive,
Exact.
which then attracts more positivity.
It's like a magnet.
Yeah, it is.
You attract what you focus on.
It's so easy to focus on what's wrong.
It is.
But when we focus on what we're grateful for,
Uh-huh. It changes everything.
it changes everything.
Yeah.
And it's something anyone can do.
Anyone can do.
So what's one key takeaway you hope our listeners are getting?
You know, I hope they're starting to see that they're not limited
Not limited.
by their circumstances or their past.
Okay.
They have the power to choose, to shape their reality,
Yeah.
and to create a life that they love.
A life of joy and purpose and fulfillment.
Exactly.
This has been so insightful.
It has been great.
You've covered so much.
Yeah, from demonstration to transforming emotions to gratitude.
And there's still more to come.
There's more to come.
In part 3, we'll delve into his 5 steps for spiritual mind treatment
All right.
and explore how to use those techniques to create lasting change.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the science of mind. We've covered a lot of ground, from the power of thought to the importance of gratitude. But now I'm really curious to explore some practical techniques we can use to apply these principles in our own lives. You mentioned something called spiritual mind treatment in the last part. Can you tell us more about that? What is it, and how does it actually work?
Sure. So spiritual mind treatment is a process of consciously aligning your thoughts and beliefs with the truth that you want to experience. So it's a way of using the power of your mind to kind of create change in your life.
So it's not just about like positive thinking or wishing for things to be different.
Yeah.
There's an actual method to it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about hoping for the best. It's a deliberate and systematic approach to working with the power of your mind.
So there are specific steps involved.
Yeah, Holmes outlines 5 specific steps.
5 steps.
Ugh.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these 5 steps.
Okay, so the first step is recognition.
Recognition.
And that means acknowledging the presence of a universal mind, that infinite intelligence that connects us all.
So we're kind of tapping into that universal energy field?
Yeah, exactly. It's that source of all creation that's always available to us.
Okay, and then what's the second step?
A second step is unification.
Unification.
And this is where you align your thoughts with the truth that you want to experience.
So we're essentially creating a mental blueprint
Yeah, kind of like a blueprint.
for the reality we desire.
Exactly. You're shifting your inner state to reflect that outer reality that you want to create.
Okay, so we're not just thinking about it, we're really feeling it.
Right. The third step is realization.
Realization.
And that's about moving beyond just thinking about it to actually feeling the reality of that truth in your heart and mind.
So we're embodying the feeling of already having what we desire.
Exactly. It's about feeling the joy, the gratitude, the peace that comes with knowing that you're connected to all that you want.
I can see how that would be powerful. And then what's the 4th step?
The 4th step is thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
And that means expressing gratitude for the manifestation of your desire, even before you see it in the physical world.
So we're thanking the universe in advance.
Yes, exactly. You're expressing faith that it's already done, even if you can't see it yet.
Okay, and then the 5th and final step.
The 5th step is release.
Release.
Letting go of any attachment to the outcome and trusting that the universe is working to bring your desire to fruition in the perfect way and at the perfect time.
So we're surrendering control.
Surrendering control, trusting the process.
Trusting that the universe knows what it's doing.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's like planting a seed and trusting that it will grow.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. You don't have to micromanage the process.
We just have to trust.
Trust in the process and know that it's unfolding as it should.
That's a beautiful image. But this whole process, it sounds like it's not a one-time thing.
No, it's definitely not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing practice, a way of life.
So we're learning to think differently, to be differently, to relate to the world in a new way.
It's about cultivating a new way of being in the world.
I like that. But what about free will? if there's this universal mind guiding everything, do we really have any choice in how our lives unfold?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and one that's been pondered for a long time. Holmes does acknowledge free will, but he also emphasizes that our choices are influenced by our beliefs, our past experiences, and the mental atmosphere that we're immersed in.
So it's like we have free will, but within certain parameters.
Yes, exactly. We have the power to choose,
Right.
but those choices are often shaped by forces that we're not even aware of.
Okay, so how do we become more aware of those subconscious influences that are shaping our choices?
It starts with paying attention
Paying attention.
to our thoughts, our reactions, and our habitual patterns of behavior.
So noticing where we get stuck.
Yeah, exactly. Those are often clues to underlying beliefs that are holding us back.
So it's about becoming more self-aware.
Self-awareness is key.
But what about those times when we feel really stuck, when we're struggling to change those patterns?
Well, that's where these spiritual principles come and these techniques that we've been talking about. It's not about forcing ourselves to change, but about aligning ourselves with a higher power, tapping into the wisdom and strength of that universal mind.
So we're not alone in this process.
We're definitely not alone.
We have help.
We have this incredible power within us, this ability to create the life that we desire.
This has been such an amazing deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We've covered so much ground, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of Holmes's teachings. But what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with as they continue to explore the science of mind?
Just remember that you are not alone on this journey. You're connected to a universal source of wisdom and love and power that's always available to you. Just tap into that power, trust in the process, and never give up on your dreams. The life you desire is waiting for you to create it.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. This deep dive into Ernest Holmes' The Science of Mind has been truly transformative, and I hope our listeners are feeling as inspired and empowered as I am to apply these principles in their own lives and create a more joyful, fulfilling, and abundant reality for themselves and for the world.